Today's declaration leaves the Obama-era deal in a place, but it puts Congress now in charge of whether or not to follow up with action, triggering a 60-day window for lawmakers to reimpose sanctions against Iran. Iran's President Rouhani saying they will continue to stick to the nuclear deal, but warns that the nation, Iran, could change its mind. Here with me to discuss, Nile Gardiner, former special advisor to Lady Thatcher and current Thatcher Center of Freedom at Heritage Director. Niall, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Charles.
This was well telegraphed. President Trump appears to have taken in some of the considerations from some of the folks in his foreign policy team, but by the same token, making it pretty clear to Iran that they are violating the spirit of this deal, and he's going to make sure they change their course of action.
Yes, I thought actually President Trump delivered a very tough, robust speech with some very, very harsh rhetoric for Iran. A very, very different tone completely from President Obama's, softly appeasement approach towards Iran. This was a very, very strong statement from the president today. And decertification, I think, is a very important first step in terms of dealing with the huge, overwhelming threat that the Middle East faces from Iran, that the West faces in general, and also, of course, the United States. And so I think he sent, definitely the right message to a hostile regime. And decertification, in my view, potentially is the first step along the path to the United States altogether withdrawing from the deal, actually, because after all, if indeed Congress moves forward with reimposing U.S. sanctions against Iran effectively, the United States would no longer be party to this agreement. So this is a very, very big move by the president today, and the Iran nuclear deal, without a doubt, is a very bad, reckless deal signed by President Obama without any support at the time from the United States Congress, without the support of the American people. A very bad agreement, I think, for U.S. interests.
Now, having said that, it was a deal signed in partnership with the European allies. I think the European Union out with a statement saying that President Trump, no one person, in fact, could unilaterally unravel this deal. Where do we stand with respect to them? Theresa May earlier this week pointing a statement directly at President Trump saying that they think Iran is living within the rules and spirit of this deal.
Yeah, certainly there's very strong opposition to U.S. decertification and indeed to any U.S. withdrawal from the deal. The strongest opposition in Europe is coming from the European Commission at the heart of the European Union, and also from France and Germany. And I think for the EU, there are a number of factors here. I think, national security isn't exactly top of the list for the European Union. The EU cares above all, I think, about the huge financial interest at stake for many European countries. And if you look at the large amount of deals being conducted between French and German companies, Italian companies, for example, with the regime in Tehran, there's a lot of money to lose here. After all, a company like Total, France's biggest oil company, is now working through a $5 billion deal with Iran, actually, to exploit gas fields. So there's a lot of money at stake here. But, President Trump has to do what is in the U.S. strategic interest. What Angela Merkel or Emmanuel Macron think of the deal or what the United States does should be irrelevant. What is paramount here is the U.S. national interest. And I think that President Trump certainly is acting in the U.S. national interest today.
I'll stay right there because I want to bring in our panel, Hudson Institute fellow Michael Pregent, a former military intelligence officer who advised General David Petraeus and served on the H.R. McMaster before he was named National Security Advisor, and Rebecca Grant, a former Secretary of the Air Force official and current IRIS independent research president. Rebecca, I'll start with you. Okay, so now this lands in the lap of Congress. Not a lot of folks these days have confidence that Congress can get anything done, even something like this. So how do you game this out for us? How do you see it playing out?
Well, Trump has taken a really good approach here. One, Congress was briefed. Top officials were briefed over the last couple of days. But, Charles, keep in mind there's a hugely important background here for Congress to consider, too. Trump is seeing intelligence every day on the mischief that Iran is making in the battlefield in Syria and Iraq. Don't forget, our forces had to shoot down 2 Iranian-made drones back in June because they were threatening our coalition forces. So Congress has to consider this too. What is the role of Iran in the post-combat aftermath in Iraq and Syria? So Trump has made a brilliant move here to get some more maneuvering room to look not only at the nuclear deal, but at how we go forward with regional stability. And don't forget, this deal only said it takes Iran from going from being 2 to 3 months away from a bomb to only a year away from a bomb. That was the maximum claim made. Very flimsy deal.
Yeah, in fact, many people say what everyone agrees on is it put them on an official path to the bomb. Michael, how do you see this playing out? Because it's unlikely that Iran would okay any sort of major significant changes to the deal, particularly when they've got the EU behind them and perhaps even feckless members of our own Congress.
Well, two things happened today. Secretary Mnuchin warned European and U.S. companies that doing business with companies in Iran that are tied to the Revolutionary Guard Corps could result in U.S. Treasury targeting those entities, both European, American, and Iranian companies with sanctions. That's one thing. The way I see this playing out, the president basically said, you got 3 months to do something about this, and if you don't, we're going to kill the deal. One of the interesting things here is we can actually work with our allies and present Iran a deal without them having a say, basically not having Zarif at the table to ask us to make concessions, and basically delivering the Iran deal to Iran saying these are the negotiations. We want access to these sites, no ballistic missiles, and we're going to continue to put sanctions on the Revolutionary Guard Corps.
What about their spread of terror in the region? To Rebecca's point, at Yemen to it and other things. This is part of their core goals. So it's hard to imagine them giving that up.
Well, they're going to have to, because the entirety of the IRGC was designated today. That's huge. That's ramifications for any country that has an IRGC proxy or IRGC-backed militia in their country. They have to actually purge them from their security forces. I'm talking about Iraq, I'm talking about Syria, I'm talking about Beirut, and I'm talking about Yemen. There are a lot of these entities that can be targeted now. The Revolutionary Guard Corps designation today is actually bigger than decertification.
Yeah.
Because the IRGC actually runs their ballistic missile program. The IRGC does a lot of the testing. So this is a big day. And this is the first time the government's ever designated a country's military as a terrorist organization.
That was really the headline here, wasn't it, Nile? Going directly after the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, President Trump took a firm stance against them.
Well, this sends exactly the right message, and the Revolutionary Guard's activities run through every aspect, actually, of the Iranian government. They are at the very heart of the regime. And also by targeting the Revolutionary Guards, you also will target and hit the Iranian economy and a large number of international companies and so on that do business with Iran. And so the tentacles of the Revolutionary Guard spread throughout the Iranian regime. So President Trump and his administration was absolutely right to target them today. This is a very important first step.